morning, everybody. My name's Helen McVicker, and like Diane, I'm one of the professional advisors at NISCC. I work in the fitness to practice side of the house, so you probably hope that you don't have too much contact with me and my colleagues. But you may or may not be aware that within NISCC we have recently changed how we do our business of regulation, and I wanted just to take this opportunity for a few minutes this morning just to sort of update you on some of the key changes, and I suppose most importantly what we then expect from you as managers. So I'll just run through some of the key headline points with you now. Obviously the model of regulation that we had in place was one of conduct and misconduct. So for any of you who have had dealings with NISCC in relation to a conduct matter, that's how we really operate it. But as of the 13th of May, and it actually was Friday the 13th of May, auspiciously or not, we introduced a fitness to practice model of regulation, and I'll talk more to you about what that actually means. But that brings us into line with other health and social care regulators. So I'm sure you're familiar with the NMC, for example, who regulate the nurses and midwives, GMC, our medical colleagues, and the Healthcare Professions Council, who regulate social work and 15 other professions in England. Conduct now is a wee bit old hat, and it served us well enough from the inception of the council, but we did feel it was time to sort of move to a more modern way of regulating, and one, as I say, that is more consistent with that exercised by other regulators. Change is never easy. The changes that we wanted to implement were reliant really on some amendments being made to the primary legislation, which for us in this is the Health and Personal Social Services Act Northern Ireland 2001. So we actually needed to work with the department to make some changes to the legislation, which in turn would give effect to a fitness to practice model. And I suppose just at sort of the high level, the key things that legislation enabled us to do, it really introduced a more proportionate model of regulation with a greater range of sanctions, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that. It also gave the council a power to obtain information and also to disclose information. Now, we always did disclose the outcomes of hearings of the decisions that were made, but we needed really just to copper fasten that within the legislation, and we took the opportunity to do that. You may or may not be aware that registrants can appeal any decision of NISCC to the Care Tribunal in Northern Ireland. And really, traditionally the Care Tribunal was really only allowed to either uphold or to dispense with a decision that came out of a hearing process. They had no powers to vary decisions, and the legislation now enables the Care Tribunal to have those varying powers. So we talk a lot about fitness to practice, but what really does it mean? And this, I suppose, is the definition that we have adopted. So you'll see there that it means that a registrant has the skills, knowledge and character to practice their profession safely and effectively. But it is about much more than professional performance. It also includes acts by a registrant which may have an impact on public protection or confidence in the profession or regulatory process. And that may also include matters not directly related to professional practice. So it may, for example, relate to conduct or behaviour that someone engages in outside of the workplace. So really, obviously, the primary purpose of regulation is to protect the public, but it's also about upholding public confidence in social work and social care, and it's also about ensuring that how we do and conduct our business gives the public assurance and confidence in our regulatory processes. So it's important, I think, to see fitness to practice in that sort of broader context. As I say, it is about professional performance and public protection, but it's about much more than that as well. So what then, in terms of our business within NISCC, we are generally looking at situations which have given rise to impaired fitness to practice. And unlike a conduct model, this is, I suppose, is one of the key distinctions here. Conduct model really looked on what someone had done in the past, and while it's not, never was intended to be punitive in its intent, it was really about imposing a sanction because of that misconduct that had occurred in the past. The concept of impaired fitness to practice is a much more forward-looking idea, and it's basically predicated on the idea that yes, someone could have behaved in this way in the past, but we're really looking at the decision in the here and now. So is their fitness to practice impaired today and into the future? And it may be that the person, yes, did commit misconduct, but in the intervening time has been able to offer some remediation. Maybe that's around training, it might be just about the insight they have displayed or their remorse for their behaviour. So impairment is really looking much more into the person's future, current and future fitness to practice rather than the past. And again, like misconduct, impairments found where the registrant has breached the standards of conduct and practice, and Diane referred to those earlier. They really form our regulatory framework. So whenever we receive an allegation that a registrant's fitness to practice may be impaired, we will measure that against the standards of conduct and practice. So we don't use some sort of concocted or arbitrary benchmark. We use the standards, and they are clearly articulated for social work and social care, and that's why we are so keen that the workforce is very clear about what's expected from them. And again, we rely very heavily on you as managers to ensure that your workforce is very clear about the required standard and the importance of adhering to the standards of conduct and practice. There are what we call 6 gateways to impairment. So you can still be referred to us on a misconduct matter, and that, just for ease of example, may be where someone has submitted fraudulent mileage claims. You can also now be referred on grounds of competence in its own right. Now, I think it's important to say here that really we are looking at competence or lack of it that would constitute a public protection concern, and we would really expect employers to have exhausted their own capability procedures before they would refer a competence matter through to NISCC. Again, a registrant can be referred on the basis of their health, either physical or mental health, and again that's at the very serious end of the continuum where that health matter may be placing either the registrant or the people they work with at risk. So the best examples there perhaps are maybe a severe mental health issue, which maybe the person is kind of acutely unwell, or it may be the issue of substance misuse or addiction problems. So again, those are the kinds of things that we're looking at there. Someone can also come in under fitness to practice as a result of a criminal conviction, and that's obviously fairly straightforward in a sense. It's, you know, and that conviction can pertain to something that they have done or failed to do within the context of work. Quite often it will be what has happened outside of work, and motoring offences and more serious motoring offences are one example there, or where people maybe get into fights outside nightclubs and the drink's in and the wet's out, and that again can be something that we are interested in. Any determinations that are made by another regulatory body, so you know, sometimes people are maybe, or you know, have nurse registration, or you know, with people who've maybe been registered, for example, with the General Teaching Council. But if another relevant regulatory body has made a finding of impairment, we would want to, you know, to know about that. And lastly, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Disclosure and Barring Service. So if someone's listed by the DBS, again, we would want to know about that. So those are the 6 kind of gateways as such which can bring someone in to the fitness to practice arena. Now, none of those things means essentially that we will find that their fitness to practice is impaired, but it will at least cause, you know, we will initiate an investigation process in and around that. So those are kind of the gateways that may bring someone to our attention. One of the things that's in your pack this morning, and would really wish to commend to you, is the standard of acceptance that we have produced in NISCC. So you'll see there in your pack, fitness to practice, standard of acceptance, fitness to practice, allegations, and that primarily has been developed for employers. So that will give you a sense of the sorts of things that we are interested in and can investigate, and matters which are not really for us at the end of the day, or which may be more appropriately signposted elsewhere, including, for example, to the service regulator and the RQIA. So I would really commend that short paper to you. Hopefully it's plainly written, and that will hopefully give you a steer as a manager as to what you should be referring through to this, and you know, again, sort of maybe what we as a regulator would expect you as an employer to manage. We may not be particularly interested. One of the key things you'll see in that document, that we're talking now really about an allegation being made to the council rather than a complaint, and there's a reason for that, because sometimes particularly members of the public would see us as a complaints resolution body, and we're not. We're a regulator, and we just think that maybe the concept of talking about an allegation of impaired fitness to practice perhaps gives that message out more clearly. So we're not, it's a wee bit more difficult, because when you have a complaint you can talk about a complainant, but when you have an allegation you can't really talk about an alligator. So it's a bit of a mouthful, person making an allegation, but we do think it's important that the language we use gives the public a better steer and concept of what a regulator actually does, and we're not a complaints resolution body. The other thing just to say as well, that we have, as part of our reform process, introduced a 5-year rule, so we will not routinely take allegations or investigate them where they have taken place more than 5 years ago. Now, there are some caveats there. Obviously, historical abuse inquiries are all around us at the minute, so if there was an allegation coming out, for example, around sexual abuse of a child that happened 20, 30 years ago, we would still be interested in that, because there's a public interest to be served there. But by and large, when you try to investigate things that are historic, you've all sorts of difficulties in terms of witnesses, evidence, and just the ability to accurately recall. So the general rule of thumb is that we will not take or investigate matters more than 5 years old. But as I say, do bear in mind those caveats. So what in essence do we need from you as managers? And I suppose in summary, 3 key things. We need referrals that meet the standard of acceptance, and I will outline when you should be referring a member of staff to NISCC. We need timely provision of supporting information that enables us to investigate an allegation, and we have built within our legislation a power to compel the provision of that information. It's not a power that we want to use, to be honest, but at times we've had real difficulty extracting information from employers, which has either delayed an investigation process or in more serious cases seriously compromised our ability to do our job as a regulator and to protect the public. So as I say, we don't want to have to wield the stick around powers of compulsion, but we will do it if we have to, if we feel that it's actually compromising our ability to protect the public. And the other thing as well just is we require from you as employers both your support and cooperation with any investigations or hearings, but also your support for staff, both to give witness statements where that may be required, or to actually come to a hearing and act as a witness. Not something that any of us in this room would really want to do. And it is a difficult process, there's no getting away from that. But in the standards of conduct and practice now, those requirements are clearly outlined, that we do expect our registrants and our employers to cooperate with NISCC's investigation process and hearings, because at the end of the day, our primary responsibility is to ensure that those we work with are protected and kept safe, and that's a shared agenda. So, when do we want to hear from you? And again, most of you are hopefully familiar with this, but it does no harm sometimes just maybe to reiterate the kind of criteria. Anytime a worker is suspended or redeployed as an alternative to suspension, because sometimes the latter happens, in both those situations we would want you to alert us, and obviously you can do that initially by phone call or email, and then we will direct you. The employer referral form is on the NISCC website, and we can direct you to that and help you with any queries you might have about how to complete that. Where you dismiss a worker, we need to hear about that as well. Or sometimes what happens is the worker resigns during a disciplinary process. Now we would still require to know about that, because the difficulty is they're maybe no longer in your employ, but if you don't alert us, there's nothing to stop that person going out the next week and signing up to work with another employer. So I think in the spirit of being a bit collegiate, we want to kind of protect the public certainly, and to give other employers the sort of heads up as much as possible. So even if they're no longer in your employ, we would ask you to let us know about the matter. Where you become aware of a criminal charge or conviction against the worker. Now anyone who's on our register signs a commitment at the point of registration and on renewal that they will notify NISCC of anything that may call their fitness to practice into question. So it's much better for a registrant if they let us know, because the work that we do, you're probably aware, comes under the Notifiable Occupations Scheme. So we will hear about it from the PSNI, and it's much better that we hear it from the registrant. But please, as an employer, don't make an assumption that your worker has told us. We would still require that you would follow that up. And basically then, just in any other circumstance where you feel that what the person has done or failed to do may have a bearing on their registration. So never worry about lifting the phone to us. There is a conduct, fitness to practice team, all very experienced staff, and they will be very happy to advise you if you're in doubt. So I suppose the simple wee maxim is, if in doubt, check it out. We can very quickly tell you whether it's something that we are interested in, or something that we is not for us as the regulator. So please don't struggle. Lift the phone, and as I say, we can give you really quite a quick response. I think I'm still okay for time. I know I was given 10 minutes, but Jan said I was allowed to talk longer, so I've just another couple of slides, but I thought it might be useful. Just to give you a wee sense of our process. Now, I don't want to bore you to tears with this. And again, all this information is on our website. If you go in under Fitness to Practice, there's a guidance about what Fitness to Practice means. And then there's another guidance document, Fitness to Practice, what you need to know. And both of those, I hope, would be helpful for you as employers. But obviously we get information, and most of our information comes from employers, it's fair to say. So about 65% of our referrals would come from directly from employers, and that's, I think, fairly appropriate. And then we, for information to become an allegation, it has to relate to one of our registrants. It has to potentially call their fitness to practice into question, and thirdly, it has to meet the criteria outlined in our standard of acceptance, the document just that's in your pack. So we will do those 3 checks to basically ensure that yes, it sort of meets our test initially to be investigated. And we then proceed with an investigation. Now you'll see down here, just sorry I don't have a wee red light on this, direct transfer. We have the provision where there's a serious criminal conviction to send that right straight through to a final hearing. There's no point of going through all those intervening steps, because we know that it's something that will meet all the various tests that are required, and it's actually it makes sense all around just to kind of progress matters like that and to process them as expediently as possible. All other cases, though, we will proceed to investigate, and we can do really at that investigation stage really one of 4 things. We can close the case. We can say it doesn't meet, we've done a preliminary investigation, and there's not enough substance here for us to take the case forward. We can give advice. Now, but by advice, what we really would be saying to people is, yes, your practice in this instance falls short of what we would expect, not to the extent that we're going to take you through a fitness to practice process, but we might say to the person, be mindful about your standards of conduct and practice. So it's really just a kind of a letter that reminds them that what they did maybe wasn't ideal. We can also now, this is one of the new things that we can do, we can what's known as consensually dispose of a case. And that's really where we, as the council, can impose a sanction without it going to a formal hearing. So we can impose a warning, we can issue a warning. We can agree undertakings with a registrant, which are things that they will either maybe do by way of training or something like that, or not do. And we can also agree with the person to remove them from the register, and again there are clear criteria for all of those, which will be in the information on our website. For those to be effective, we really need the registrant to engage with us and also to admit the facts, so to speak. So, we need people to put their hands up and be prepared to accept one of those consensual disposals. That is public facing, so it will still go on our website in terms of offering that level of public transparency and protection. But it's a lot more cost effective for us, and it's also a lot less stressful for the individual registrant. So again, for your staff, if they find themselves in this arena, and hopefully they won't, the key message that I would say is engage. Don't bury your head in the sand. Speak to us, engage in the process, and where at all possible, unless a matter's very serious and there's a public interest to be served in going to a formal hearing, we will, where possible, try and dispose of the case consensually. So that's one of the key changes. Where the person doesn't engage with us, or where we feel that the matter is more at the more serious end of the spectrum, we will then refer on to a committee. And just to say that our committees are independent of council, and they comprise social work, social care members and lay majorities. So, the hearings take place in this premises, but the committees are actually independent of NISCC, and that sort of separates the investigatory part of the process from then the decision-making aspect of it. And a committee similarly can close a case, they can give that advice that I mentioned, or they can move the matter on then to a final fitness to practice hearing. Just one of the other things you'll see up above there, interim orders. If the matter is very serious and constitutes a serious fitness to practice public protection concern, we can impose an interim suspension order or interim conditions of practice order, which means that the person is either not able to continue working, or they have restrictions on their practice until the hearing process is concluded. And where something then goes to a hearing, those are generally in the public domain, unless it's a health matter, in which case it will be heard in private. And again, those final fitness to practice hearings can do one of four things. They can impose a warning of up to 5 years. They can impose conditions of practice. Now that's a new thing for us, and it's really saying to the person, yes, you can remain in work, but in order to do that, we want you to meet certain conditions. That may be that they agree to undertake a programme of training. It may be that their employer sends us reports at regular intervals, monitoring their performance and progress. It may be a condition that they don't work with a particular service user group. So before we review, we can suspend, warn or remove. So these conditions of practice are new, and the benefit really is that people can stay in work, but safeguards are put in place just to restrict their practice. We can, as we've always been able to do, suspend someone for up to 2 years, and in the most serious cases we can remove from the register. And you'll see down the side there, review, because fitness to practice, because it is a more dynamic concept. Before we would return anybody to the register, there will be a formal review mechanism there that basically says, yes, we're satisfied that their fitness to practice is no longer impaired. Okay, it might be just useful to give you just quick, people like stats and numbers about these sorts of things, just to give you a wee sense of the numbers of complaints that we receive for social work, social care, and you'll be aware probably that we are one of the regulators, one of the few regulators who actually registers social work students. But you'll see there that the total register, now this is for last year, 15 to 16, our register's obviously up since then, but of a total register of almost 25,000 people, we received 265 complaints. So literally just about 1% of the workforce ever comes across our fitness to practice radar. And I think it's very important for me to stress that today, because sometimes I think people think that NISCC, that they tend to think of the fitness to practice aspect, but we have a whole workforce development team and a whole commitment to supporting the workforce in its entirety, not just the 1%. So that's a very small percentage that comes before our attention in terms of fitness to practice. I should also say that we close over half those cases at the preliminary stage, you know, and that will generally be maybe where we can't, you know, we haven't enough evidence or, you know, enough witnesses or to basically take a case forward. You'll see there that social care worker complaints constitute 73% of all complaints, but that's fairly proportionate to the register. So don't look at that and think, oh, they're awful, much more naughty than social workers. And that really just reflects, as Colin mentioned earlier, that, you know, we have many more social care workers on our register than social workers. So it's just helpful sometimes, I think, to put that in its context. And just, I suppose, my final slide, and I think it's always kind of good to finish on this note. The best guarantee of safe and effective practice are individual workers, social care workers, practitioners, social workers, whatever our designations are. That is always going to be the best guarantee of keeping people safe and ensuring that they receive good quality care. And, you know, that's the starting point for all of us. So for us, it's about registering them, it's about ensuring they're aware of the standards of conduct and practice, it's about ensuring that you as employers have good recruitment and selection processes, that you've good induction processes, you've good ongoing training and support and supervision, because the individuals out there are always going to be the best guarantee of safe and effective practice. But there are very few of us who work in a vacuum or in isolation. So most of us, the team might look different, and some of us may be more closely linked to a team than others. But generally we will have colleagues who can offer us support, constructive challenge maybe of our practice where that's required. And employers, alluded to in Colin's opening remarks, how critical managers are in all of this. So really, in a sense, we see ourselves as the tip of the pyramid, and really safe, effective, compassionate care should largely be managed at those first three layers, close to where the care is actually delivered. We're the tip of the fine point of the pyramid there, and really, as you can see, that, you know, only about 1% needs to come to us. So most of it is managed through good, robust employment practices. And just finally, I thought I would give it a plug, and then I will sit down, because I think I'm in the way of coffee, which I see is now there. So we'll break just after I've finished. But just to let you know, we do have the new standards of conduct and practice, which replaced the former code, and the new standards were launched on the 1st of November last year. So hopefully they're out there, they're circulating, and our challenge now with you is to get them embedded in practice. We are in the middle of undertaking revisions of the employer code at the minute. We started with the standards for staff because we felt that was the proper place to start, and we are doing that piece of work as a joint initiative with RQIA as the service regulator, because we are required in the legislation to produce the employer code but it's actually RQIA as part of their inspection processes who have the enforcement powers. And we are engaging with stakeholders as part of that process. So we have on our steering group employer representatives across the different sectors. We will be going out to consult on that shortly, so sort of October, November time, and that will run for the usual 12-week period. And it's our hope then that we would have a product to launch in March or April of next year. So I suppose my plug to you this morning is to respond to the consultation. We'll have plenty of stuff up on our website about that. It will probably be done by a survey monkey, but you're very key constituents in that consultation process. So we want to hear from you whether you feel that the standards that we have revised will work for you as employers. And we're not wanting to wheel these out as yet another set of standards or a stick to beat people with. They're really what we feel is good practice for employers of social work and social care registrants. And I'm sure won't ask you to do anything over and above what you're all already doing. So just to finish with that, in terms of watch this space, and please do take the time just to respond to that. So thank you very much for your attention this morning. And thank you, Helen.